Okay, so here we are after the first affirmative constructive and after the cross-examination. So we've gotten a bit of information about what the affirmative is going for, and we challenged him on a couple of the statements that we made. And now it's really time to start constructing the negative to the response. So I have the completed uh, flow sheet, you can see, with everything marked. And you can see how, like, this way the claims really start popping out. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to show you a few things to look for, and it is really easy to apply these strategies to any topic in debate, not just for molten salt reactors or the nuclear case that was being presented to us, okay? So before you even start searching things, I suggest that you strategize about what you want to look for. Otherwise, you feel like you're going in blind, okay? So let's take the first affirmative speech in the order that they were, that the arguments were given. Maybe I could go after some of the definitions, but I'm really, anytime that you are having a policy debate, you should really focus in on whatever their plan text is, okay? And so for the plan text, it gives a very specific bill, and we can look up that bill, all right? So first thing, remember I have my academic search engine, I have my popular search engine, and then I got my political search engine specifically just for bills. So let's take a look at HR 3306, Nuclear Leadership Energy Act. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna take a look and see how long it is. It's pretty long. It's a little difficult. So now I do want to understand as much of this bill as possible, but take a look. This is dense. This is difficult to kind of sift through, and not everything is going to be directly relevant to the case that we're trying to make on the negative, okay? So one of the things I suggest is that I just do Command F on Mac, Control F on PCs. And let's take a look and see if they have MSR. Nope. Molten salt. There we go. There's only one mention of a molten salt, so a testing facility. So I want to go up to the section that this is in. Oh, a big long section. Nuclear reactor research, development goals. Okay, so let's go back down here. He also, in the other thing that was mentioned was HALEU. So let's take a look at that. So these are definitions. So it looks, so as I'm reading through this, what I'm noticing is that there's a lot of research, and it's not necessarily allocating money for just building the reactors themselves. Okay, so I'm going to make a little note right there. So I'm putting a note, maybe if you could see it, it says research rather than infrastructure. A little note to myself to kind of remind myself that the thing is, when people are proposing bills that research something that might be cool in the future, what they're doing is they're taking on this timeline, this really long timeline, and you should, you should use that to your advantage, because if we're talking about fixing climate change, and like the first one of these reactors are going to take years and years of research, let alone construction, in order to get it up and running. That is years and years that climate change is getting worse and worse. And so now the question is, are we going to do it within the timeline that is going to solve climate change? And so another thing I suggest is going straight to your popular search engine, in this case Google, and then look up that bill as well. Not just GovTrack and not congress.gov, because they tell you the same thing that we just saw. You want to find a news a news source of some sort. American Enterprise Institute, Cannibal, U.S. This Thomas Library of Congress.gov is the same thing as like GovTrack. So you want to find, C-SPAN might not have any sort of. Let's take a look at what the American Institute of Physics says about it. Nothing much. Nothing much. Okay, so the first thing I suggest is make sure that you understand the plan. Now, once you kind of have a little bit, make sure that that's what I'm going to go for. When you come to the advantages, remember we have our harms, we have inherency, we have solvency, and we have 3 impacts, okay? Now, you don't need to go through and respond to each one of these one by one. For instance, you don't need to say in response to the harms that that 2 degrees Celsius increase is not important. That's not your burden, okay? You can completely agree with that, but basically, usually the weakest part of any advantage is in the solvency. So in the solvency, what I suggest is for you to make sure that you are holding the affirmative to the standard that they are supposed to solve these harms. Take a look at this. The harms are 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius increase. So if I were to go over here, my response is going to be that climate change here. Rather, that's passive. I'm sorry. I was about to say climate change won't be solved by, but I'm going to say MSRs will not prevent 1.5 to 2 degrees increase. Now the thing is, I don't have, let me make sure that I spell increase correctly, that I don't have evidence that supports this, but what I'm doing is I'm kind of phrasing the claim that I want to support, and just seeing if it kind of passes this smell test, whether or not it seems like a claim that can be supported through evidence. And I think that sounds fairly reasonable. So let me go to my popular one. Will nuclear energy solve climate change? Look at this. We can't solve climate change without nuclear power. That doesn't go for us. Why nuclear power can't solve climate change by itself? That gets us closer. The full solution to climate change, that starts getting closer as well. Let's take a look at the academic search engine. Okay, so nuclear offset. I don't know what nuclear offset means. Maybe you do, maybe somebody else does, but I'm not an expert in this. I become more and more of an expert as the more research that I do. But I want to understand is like, Can nuclear energy be much help when it comes to fighting climate change, or have nuclear advocates overstated their case? The likelihood that nuclear power plays a significant role is very low, absent game-changing innovations. Game-changing. That's what he's going to say. He says, well, this is a game-changing innovation. Uh-huh. Using nuclear power to replace I could also, whoopsie, didn't want to do that. Okay. So another thing that you can put in here is, hey, wait, what was it called? Yeah. So start looking up this centrist selected for Haley enrichment project. So now I put words like danger in there for the fuel source that he was pointing out, the secret to avoiding another nuclear disaster. All these things seem really affirmative. Now, there's nothing wrong with you on the negative, focusing in your search on the negative. That's your job, right? The debate as a whole has two sides that are supposed to be invested on the affirmative and on the negative. If you're focusing on the negative, that's your job, and your opponent's supposed to focus on the affirmative. And basically, you just you bring that together, and you just allow it to work itself out. Let's take a look at salt reactors, dangers. Okay, thorium power has. Here we're starting to get it. We're starting to find stuff. Look, thorium power has protactinium problem, and don't believe the spin about thorium being a greener option. So notice that we're having a little bit of trouble finding our stuff, but we're doing just fine, all right? And so let's take a look at what the bulletin says. What is the bulletin? We're going to have to look up your sources for that. And what is protactinium? Separate, short changed. Come on. Get out of my way. Okay, here we are. Several nations are explored thorium power. Thorium reactors have advantages. Okay. Oh, so this one, this is proliferation is a term that's used to describe when the abundance of nuclear weapons or nuclear fuel, and it refers to the dangers um, of nuclear energy in terms of like terrorist activities or rogue missiles or things like that, and just basically mutually assured destruction. So oftentimes when you're doing research, you're trying to find one thing and you come across something else. This one I want to save, okay? I'm going to use my use my note-saving app, Evernote. Oh, all right, there you go. That one is saved, okay? So I can come back to it later. I probably want to put it in the, oh, it is in there, in the right folder. See, look, so it does produce weapons grade stuff, and now we could start building our own disadvantage. And so the disadvantage is already taking shape. You can even put a little note in there. I'll just call it proliferation. Whoops, hiccup. Okay. Still, right here. Boom. So I'm not finding exactly what I want, but you know what? The reason why I like this is sometimes you have to take a different tack, all right? How about instead of talking about nuclear energy, type in a statement. It is too late to stop, climate change. So is it too late to prevent climate change? Is it too, oh, look at this. Take a look at this. Now, I hope I want you to see here is that even though I didn't find something that specifically says that nuclear energy can't do it, I am finding something that says that nothing can stop climate change. All right, like Scientific American, National Journal. Remember, you always want to double check your sources, so National Journal needs to have a little background. Oh, but it doesn't even have an article. Okay, Times of Israel. I've done enough research to know that this is reputable enough to cite. It's too late. We're doomed. Here we go. Not bad. April 29th, 2018. A prominent British social scientist is warning climate change will be. Boom. There we go. Okay. So what am I going to do? I am using my Evernote app for this, but what I want to do now is I want to create, I want to organize it a little bit better. I want to get a new notebook, and I'm going to call this solvency takeouts. All right, create that. Boom. So I'm not reading the whole article as I go. I'm reading enough of it to kind of know, oh yeah, I could use this, save it, move on, okay? So it really, right now is just about going through, and it's a numbers game. You're trying to find as many sources as you can, putting them together in a particularly organized fashion, and when you come back later, it becomes really easy to kind of tease out the little elements and put them into an organized setup, okay? So I probably want to find, you know, maybe one or two more. It's still saving the clip. I want to find one or two more pieces of evidence just about how climate change has, that would be a good search term, is beyond the point of no return, or that any sort of other, you know, particular anecdotal evidence that might help that case, and just say that, you know, if you're trying to solve climate change, then it doesn't matter what you do, nuclear energy isn't going to save it. Okay, so as that one works, let's take a look at advantage 2. So notice I didn't focus on every single line, right? I'm just focusing on the solvency. Let's do that again. Solvency is always the weakest part. Solvency. US will create much needed leg up in research and development arm. What's the harms? The world is terrified of nuclear energy. So this is just making, so the second advantage is people feel better about nuclear energy. This might be you might be able to respond to the harms that and say nuclear nuclear energy how about people should be scared of nuclear energy. So why am I saying this? Okay, if the harms is like, well, people think that nuclear energy is bad. I'm like, yeah, well, it is. And that's where I could start using the proliferation evidence that I found before, and I wasn't even thinking about it at the time, right? And so nuclear energy is dangerous. I could look up certain things like, you know what, I'm just gonna let that one keep on working, and I'll do this. Like, how about nuclear? Oh wait, thorium mining. Why not thorium? Thorium deposits, thorium minerals education. Thorium, remember, it's you are the negative. You can put in some negative one. Thorium dangers, public health statement. Here we go. So mining in and of itself could be poisonous, and I might take a few clips and put that in there. But also remember, in this advantage, he starts talking about how we can trade with India. So if I wanted to just draft India is or slash will be unstable because of political agendas. So let's take a look at that. So just to kind of show you, India unstable government. Boom. Is instability in India's destiny? BBC News, not bad. India will rise regardless of its politics. So this one's, you know, a few years old, and you probably want, for this particular type of statement that you're looking up, you want to look at the more recent stuff. Decade and a half of Karnataka's unstable politics. Okay. So you could look up other, remove that, boom, 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 and that one's more about the thing. So you could use some key terms like theocracy, right? That oh, look at this, Kashmir. Can the world's largest democracy endure another 5 years of the Modi government? From Time magazine. That one sounds pretty negative. Oh. Oh, look at this statement right here. That's not bad. So now you can start painting the narrative that India isn't a whole lot more stable than Iran. The more you look into it, you'll see that they have a lot of friction with Pakistan, and that will force us to like take sides in that one. Specific regional issues like Kashmir, the treatment of Muslims within the country are all things that India have that you can now put into this sort of response that like that's not necessarily a good thing. And so now you really only you have two major refutations for that, and then You can do a proliferation disadvantage. The last thing that I'm going to suggest is think about a counterplan as well, right? So if I go here and get rid of this, go back, saving your clip, still working. All right. And if I search for, I don't know, nuclear energy. So what you'd want to do is find, take a look at this one. So the reason I'm focusing in on this one is because it is competitive. If you want to abolish nuclear weapons and economy, to provide for nuclear weapons and economic conversion in accordance with a boom and clean energy conversion. If I read just a little bit, look at this. Addressing, including development and deployment of sustainable carbon-free and nuclear-free energy sources. Boom, boom, boom. So one thing that you could do is in response to your opponent's bill, you could provide your own bill, but remember they have to be competitive. And in the text of this bill, it says that you want to go nuclear free. Okay. And so that might be something that you want to just make a note of. So that is HR 2419. And that might just be the bill that you're looking for. So take a look. We got ourselves we have a disadvantage. We have two really strong refutations that we can put together. And we have the possibility of a counterplan, which I think would be relying on some of the other clean energy technology other than nuclear, and you'd be able to say that it's like, hey, nuclear still has a proliferation problem, and we still have to be working with foreign countries that might have political agendas that put us into tricky situations. So why don't we just do local green energy, like wind and solar and geothermal and stuff like that. All right. So I need you to kind of imagine finishing up this research project by actually finding a good 2 or 3 articles for every position that we put together. You would end up with 9 to 12 sources that you would cite in this upcoming speech, and you should be good to go. All right.